Before we were able to build giant scary ships capable of overcoming the world's angriest seas, humans relied mainly on wooden sailing boats to conquer and explore new continents. But even though kingdoms and countries were able to reach the farthest points of the planet, in many cases, their ships couldn't simply resist against Mother Nature's anger, and many expeditions either canceled the journey halfway or never made it back at all. But there was one particular group of people who truly mastered the seas: the Vikings. From a small tribal community on a cold corner of Earth to a terrifying conquering force that spread as far as Africa, all thanks to a genius design. What made the Vikings' longships unbreakable, and why other kingdoms couldn't replicate them no matter how hard they tried? This is how a genius ship design literally changed human history. Before it became a scary war machine, the Vikings' longships went through humble beginnings. The ship originated as a humble dugout canoe, also called log boat. For hundreds of years, Scandinavians had relied on these canoes for transportation. Dense forests and towering mountains complicated overland journeys, but the long coastlines, rivers, and lakes offered a viable alternative. The earliest canoes were merely hollowed-out logs, propelled by paddles, but then innovation struck. Over time, the Scandinavians enhanced these logboats by adding planks using the clinker or lapstrake technique, where the planks overlapped and were fastened to each other along their edges. As the Roman Empire expanded north, some Scandinavians found themselves serving in the armies of their new neighbors. During that time, they absorbed the ins and outs of the Romans' maritime technology and came home with a plan. The Mediterranean cultures at the heart of the Roman Empire wielded massive warships that dominated the seas, alongside cargo vessels that transported precious goods along the waterways. These ships, powered by both sail and oars, were constructed with a robust skeleton of internal timbers, fastened to the outer planks with copper, iron, and wood nails. The Vikings used these Roman techniques to come up with the design of longships. At first, they incorporated these advancements by replacing their loose paddles with anchored oars, a modification that dramatically increased efficiency, but also demanded stronger ships. This led boat builders to adopt iron nails for fasteners instead of the traditional sewing methods. They transitioned from the log boat base to a keel plank, resulting in vessels that were taller and more seaworthy. But even in this evolution, they held onto a pivotal concept. These early ships retained the original logboat design. Their strength came from the outer shell of wood rather than internal frames and beams. They were constructed as thin-walled shells, light but remarkably strong, far more agile than their Roman counterparts. At a time of fierce competition, ship captains rapidly refined these new ships to enhance efficiency. The lighter the vessel, the more versatile it became, requiring fewer resources, something extremely important at the time in a decentralized culture. Despite their impressive capabilities, these ships were initially sailless. Sails were a costly addition, and for the time being, the rowed ships sufficed for their needs. But then, a huge shift happened. Following the collapse of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century, Western Europe experienced a significant economic downturn, which leveled the playing field for the Scandinavians. As the region began to revive, new and vigorous trade routes emerged, stretching into and through Scandinavia. The wealth flowing along these routes helped forge a new, prosperous class of Scandinavians, who found themselves in fierce competition over trade routes and territorial claims. By the 8th century, the idea of a sailing ship began to make a lot more sense. With the addition of sails, these already agile and swift ships became nearly unstoppable. The Viking ship was finally born. These long ships could soon carry as many as 100 Vikings into battle, creating scary fleets capable of landing on open beaches, penetrating deep into river systems, and even get transported over land when necessary. At the dawn of the Viking era, it was their unparalleled speed that set them apart. The mobility provided by their ships was nothing short of revolutionary. Imagine a fleet of longships swiftly rounding a headland, sailing right up onto the beach with astonishing agility. They could navigate rivers and venture deep inland, allowing them to strike at vulnerable targets across Britain, Ireland, and France. But their journey didn't end there. Soon after, they ventured even further, exploring the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and crossing the North Atlantic. By the 8th century, these vessels were equipped with a large sail, supported by a massive block of timber known as the keelson. This innovation helped distribute the weight of the mast and handle the strain of the sail when the winds were absent. When the breeze died down, crews would insert oars through holes in the upper strakes, propelling the ships forward. But there was more to these ships than just speed and design. Parts of the decking were intentionally kept loose, allowing for easy storage of weapons. They were built to instill fear in their rivals. Historical accounts suggest that these early ships were highly decorated, some even painted in vibrant colors, compelling you to pack your bags and flee to the hills as fast as you could. But how did the Vikings make use of this genius design in battle? While most kingdoms had their wars on land, the Vikings' early battles occurred at sea. Vikings were far from barbarians, and their battles organization was quite complex. In particular, the Vikings used a system of visual signs that indicated their belonging and status. This included symbols and colors painted on shields, parts of the ship banners, and weather vanes. The Viking fleet consisted of various longships and smaller carrier ships used for transporting provisions. The king led the fleet from his royal flagship, usually the largest and most heavily decorated. With their shallow draft and remarkable speed, these ships allowed the Vikings to launch surprise raids on coastal settlements, targeting vulnerable locations like monasteries and towns. Their approach was often characterized by shock tactics. They would attack quickly and withdraw before a counterattack could be organized. A typical fleet consisted of 10 to 30 ships, each manned by 20 to 100 warriors and led by skalds or captains who navigated and motivated their crews. The overall command often rested with a jarl or chieftain, coordinating multiple ships to execute unified strategies. Tactically, the Vikings employed the line formation for direct assaults and the crescent formation for encirclement, showcasing their ships' maneuverability. Crews underwent rigorous training in sailing and combat tactics, ensuring they could transition seamlessly from navigation to battle. This meticulous organization transformed the Viking fleet into a feared force that terrorized coastal settlements and reshaped the history of Europe, leaving a legacy of fear and respect. Subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.